Hi, all, and welcome to episode 51 of Plain Speaking Sanjiv. Today, I'm going to talk about a very sensitive or touchy or emotional subject. It's about sick leave and what it means to different people. This idea came about after I came across a tweet yesterday from Agamjot Singh, which said simply, if a person takes sick leave, he takes sick leave. Why does it matter if he's actually ill, hungover, or doing a mujra on TikTok? So that was a point of view expressed by Agamjot Singh, to which I responded, I retweeted that. I responded saying that this kind of thinking has held the country back. Sick leave is for when you are sick. It is not casual leave, and no well-run company will allow abuse of sick leave. Now, this started, I really opened, the can of worms here, because the kind of reaction these tweets got, the kind of emotions it brought out, really, was a revelation. And first of all, I want to say that I don't have a predisposed view towards, right and wrong. My view is simply that if you're sick, you should not come to work. Sick doesn't have to be physically ill, it can be physical, emotional, mental. But I'll get into those details shortly. My basic hypothesis was if you're sick, don't come into work. But if you're well enough to come into work and you're not really sick, emotionally, physically, or mentally, then you should not take sick leave as casual leave. You should not be going, to see a cricket match or going for a movie or hanging out with your friends. Essentially, you should not be bunking just because you have sick leave allocation available to you. Well, that was the starting point of the discussion. So let's first go through, what transpired, what are the kind of reactions people got, and then I'll share with you, what I think is going on and what it means for all of us as employees, as management, as HR, and so forth. And again, at the very outset, there's no right and wrong. There is a right and wrong, but there's no easy answer. I think it requires a lot of rethinking on all sides for us to get closure on this very emotional subject. Okay, so when I responded that sick leave is for when you're sick, it is not casual leave. Some of the initial responses I got from Hemant DP said, agree Sanjeev, we already have too many leaves and productivity is low. Hence, misuse of sick leave further hurts our own organizations and our country. Time people realize that there's no free lunch and they work for it. Rebellious Sardar wrote, sooner or later we will find these ill-informed kids in the corporate arena, and that's the sad part of the story. So these are, again, individuals who I think are taking the point of view that I am, that if you are not sick, then you should not be taking sick leave. I don't think they're saying that you should come into work if you're sick, but basically don't treat sick leave like casual leave. You have enough other leaves already. Now, again, this is a very high-level view. I'm going to go to details as to why people do what they do, why many employees seem to think that taking sick leave as casual leave is the only option they have because they never get leave, etc. I'll get into that. So what I did after this initial set of responses, and there were some very emotional responses as well about how, companies abuse the workers, companies never grant leave, companies don't trust the workers, and therefore the only option workers have is to call in sick. Because if they try to do the right thing and try to apply for leave, whether it's casual leave, 1 day leave, 2 day leave, they'll never get it. So eventually it's self-help. And that was a very strong sentiment that I've come across. Anyhow, so what I did is I put together a poll and on Twitter, to which in the last 16 hours, I've received over 1,500 votes. And the poll was simply this. It said, do you agree or not with this statement? Sick leave is an entitlement that can be used by staff even if they're not sick as a form of casual leave. So again, the question was, do you agree or not with this statement? Sick leave is an entitlement that can be used by staff even if they're not sick as a form of casual leave. The results of this poll, over 1,550 people, was that 48% agreed that sick leave can be used as casual leave even if you're not sick, and 52% disagreed. So it was a very close poll with slightly more people saying one should not use sick leave as casual leave than those who said it's perfectly all right to use sick leave as casual leave. Some of the comments that came along in response to the poll were from Speakless Rebellious, for example. I got dozens and dozens of comments, so I've just picked a few. Speakless Rebellious said, this practice is prevailing in every industry. Job satisfaction and working environment plays an important role in this. If I'm demotivated at work, I will exhaust all my sick leave and then take casual leave. So again, it's a motivation factor according to Speak Less Rebellious. Nakul K. Mohan says, not gonna lie, the leave policy in the whole country is just shitty, not just for airlines. I guess airlines is being referred to because that's my background, which is why Indians are amongst the least satisfied with the jobs in the world. That's a very strong statement and I think significant food for thought. Bulbul Pandey wrote that one can take sick leave only when he or she is really sick and can't do the job. It's not his or her personal choice. For personal choice and personal holidays, there are many other options. And yes, no one is such inhuman that they will call anybody to work even if they're sick. So this is a fairly idealistic view that agreeing with the hypothesis that you should only take sick leave when you're sick, but also thinking that or stating that no companies will force people to work if they're sick, and I don't agree with that. I know there are companies that do abuse, the privilege in the sense that they call in staff who are sick and make them work, and that's not a good thing either. So I'm not taking sides on this. I'm just going to go through different opinions, and then share with you what I think the problems are and how we need to resolve them. Aditya wrote that, in reference to one of my comments, that you said, can an employee take sick leave to roam around or be at the mall with him, his friends, or his wife? Yes, why not? He or she deserves those days off. Even on festivals, why work every year on festival? Doesn't he or she deserve to spend time with his family? So what Aditya is basically saying is that, hey, sick leave is just another form of leave. Doesn't mean you're sick or not. Just take it off. You want to hang out with your friends, family, wife, go out on Diwali, just call in sick. So that is a surprising but a fairly common sentiment that sick leave is just like any other form of leave. It's yours. You don't have to be sick, which kind of calls into question why call it sick leave. Why not just call it leave in that case? Okay, here's some very interesting food for thought. Rowan Bhargavkar says, I worked with a carrier being an airline, I assume, who considered medical leaves a cardinal sin. Sometimes you just need a day or two to reset your mind space. It is not a clinical reason, but I feel it is very legit. But they'll run a campaign for mental health matters. Well, I'm not sure what he means with the with the last remark, but I guess he says that that's discouraged, right? Big Bird 27307509, who's very active on airline related topics, even though this topic is not specific to airlines, but obviously a lot of my followers tend to be from the aviation industry. Writes, leaves are entitlement. It works both ways. Staff report to work if they're unwell, and they may have exigencies for which leave has been denied. Stop looking at this with a black and white perspective. He goes on to say, HR is extremely manipulative. They have been consistently reducing leaves and changing the policies as part of the KPIs to catapult their careers. Look inward before pointing fingers to others. What do you have to say about saints called HR? Why don't you talk about them? And I will talk about them. Megha Vaishnav said in response to saying 48% agree that sick leave can be used as casual leave, you don't need to be sick. She says, ouch, it hurts to see 48% agree. Piyush Pava writes, I feel like if they're entitled to a certain number of leaves, they very well know what to do with it. It's up to them how they want to use the sick leaves or just leaves in this case. Again, suggesting that sick leaves is just a form of casual leave, you don't have to be sick. Avtar Gill writes, last sick days I took were in 1996. So not everyone seems to fall sick that often. Noel PD writes, and I think this is a bit of satire, me to my boss. I'll be falling sick next Friday and Monday. Please don't disturb me then. Okay, thank you. I think basically making the point that if you can plan your sick leave, then obviously you're not sick, because sickness by definition means it's unplanned and unexpected. Harmot Jodh Bhulla wrote that there's something which needs to be catered to called mental health. Everyone copes with daily life differently, but yes, it should not be misused. Jatin Thakral writes, again, interesting. Yes, I think he's saying that sick leave can be used as casual leave, but that should be informed with the time gap so that an alternative can be looked into. So he's trying to, I think, be kind of a peacemaker, saying, hey, it's okay to use sick leave as casual leave, but let your management know in advance, which again suggests that you're not sick. If you can plan to be sick in advance, it means you're not really sick. Caps writes, catch couple, okay. Honestly, it depends on the CL policy of the company. If the employee knows that CLs are frequently not approved or questioned too much, he or she will tend towards calling in sick. Life happens outside of the job also. Delving into reasons behind leaves is clearly micromanagement. So I think he's making a valid point here that if the employee never gets casual leave or privileged leave granted, then they have no option but to call in sick. But then he goes on to say that delving to reasons behind leaves is clearly micromanagement. And again, there are multiple schools of thought on that. I don't think it's right for a company to question every sick leave. But if there's certain patterns which raise eyebrows, then I think companies are within the right to ask for some documentation. So Caps goes on to say that having said that, an employer has full right to analyze productivity and monitor taking of excess leaves, maybe even link them to a monetary benefit. Life can be tough for people at different stages, and to call things black or white isn't always the best way forward. Let's see if there's anything else that we want to talk about here. Well, it just goes on and on. Many more reactions. Let's see what else is maybe of interest to us. Okay, this is interesting. A bird again goes on to write, addressing this to me, that looking forward to objectivity in analysis and statistical data proving that employees are kamchor, that is freeloaders, and the employers are doodh ka dhula, which means pure and virginal and innocent. And again, there is no black and white, and I'll get to that. Chan Fang, who is, I don't think is Indian-based, writes that in my experience across the US, Europe, and Asia with global tech companies, we trust our team and it's about delivering work, not clocking hours. So even if my team member needs time because his kid is sick, just text me and that's it. Let's see. Abhinav Jain makes a couple of very good points. He says it's a philosophy difference at the end of the day. Most new age companies have unlimited leaves, employee morale is high, and performance and goals dictate everything. In my companies, I haven't seen more than a 3 to 5% variation between the two paradigms over 2 to 3 years. And so on and so forth. So I think enough of the comments. So let me share with you what my takeaways are and what my suggestions or recommendations are from this. It's very clear here that there's a school of thought very strongly that the reason people take sick leave as a form of casual leave is because otherwise they would not get leave. And I think that is a very, very key insight. And I think companies need to retrospect. Managers need to retrospect, introspect. HR departments need to rethink, and they need to make sure that they don't hold privileged leave or casual leave as some kind of power mechanism. I think they need to ensure, all good companies need to ensure that employees are given leave as long as they ask for it with sufficient notice, as long as an agreed formula is agreed to. If it's a rostering related job like a pilot or cabin crew, whether it's basis seniority or basis first in, first out, first come, first serve, that if you apply for leave, you will get it. Now, why do companies tend to, some companies tend to not allow leave or to reject the request for leave? There could be a number of reasons for it. One could be that you're applying very last minute and leaves have already been granted, and now the operation cannot actually function normally if they grant even more leaves. And that, I think, is up to the employee to plan in advance. As long as the employer has been granting leaves to others and you're asking last minute, I think some flexibility is required there. However, on the other end of the spectrum, there are certain companies who are just perennially understaffed, and they use it as a cost reduction mechanism or a cost control mechanism where they just don't have enough staff, whether it is any sector, and especially if in an operational sector like aviation, and your bare minimum number of pilots or cabin crew or below what your actual requirement is basis the number of hours that you've scheduled the aircraft to be flying, then basically you can't give leave without disrupting your operation. But that is not an acceptable reason for not giving leave. I think companies also need to understand that staff, employees are not machines. They need to understand that leaves are something that they are entitled to, something that is a part of the compensation, and something that they need to be given as long as they follow whatever agreed principle is in requesting leaves, advance notice, and so forth. And it should not be a case where employees follow the norms, ask for leaves, and are constantly denied leave. If that is the case, it means that you are trying to cut costs on the backs of employees and you're driving them to the wall, leaving them with no option but to take the law into their own hands and basically say, all right, I know I'm not going to get leave, I just won't show up. And that creates a bigger problem for you in the longer run, because having planned leave allows you to plan your reserves and your ratios and your rosters and your operation in a methodical manner. But if you don't give leave to people and people resort to self-help and they start just calling in sick or just essentially bunking work because they're not going to get leave otherwise, then you really have a problem, because it is unplanned leave. You can't predict, you can't develop rosters using reliable data, and your operation actually suffers more. So it is a very penny wise and pound foolish approach to understaff, because then in order to compensate for the staff behavior in that they resort to self-help and just call in sick, you need to then have more reserve staff. So the way out of this is companies need to staff adequately, keeping in mind the leave allocations and the leave entitlements of the staff. All right. Now, if companies staff adequately and give staff leave when leave is requested and is due, then I don't think staff or most staff will need to resort to using sick leave as a form of casual leave. So this is on the companies. You guys, all of us, need to get our act together and make sure that we adequately staff so that we can grant leaves. But then there's a second issue here, where employees, even if they happen to work for a company which does grant leaves, etc., maybe they have 25 days of leave and 5 days of or 7 days of sick leave in addition to the 25 days, so 32 days altogether, let's say. Now, there may be a company which grants you those 25 days so long as you apply in advance and so on and so forth. But there's certain staff who think that no, actually my leave entitlement is 32 days because it is 25 plus 7. And they seem to think that those 7 days of sick leave is something that they need to consume every year. They take it as a part of their privilege leave or as casual leave. And that is completely, in my mind, unacceptable. There's a reason it's called sick leave. It is called sick leave because you're sick. Sick doesn't need to mean that you've got high fever or you've broken a leg. It just means you are either physically, mentally, or emotionally not in a state to come to work. Now, no good company should force somebody who's not in a state to come to work to come to work. That is not acceptable. But on the flip side, no good employee should just decide to bunk work because they don't feel like going to work, because they want to attend somebody's birthday party or see a movie or see a cricket match or record a TikTok video, mujra on TikTok, as the original poster had said. Those are unacceptable behaviors. Why is it unacceptable? Well, two reasons. Number one, if your company grants you leave as long as you plan in advance, use that mechanism. Number two, calling in sick means you're calling in at the last minute, and that really puts stress on your co-workers because they have to fill in for you. It puts stress on the operation. It doesn't allow the operation to plan its reserves properly because you've got people who are just opting to bunk work and call in sick because they view those 7 days as an entitlement. So again, the responsibility goes in both directions. Now, it is surprising to me that 48% believe that sick leave is an entitlement and that you don't really need to be sick, you just can use it as casual leave. It suggests that we are failing somewhere in our education system and in our training. We are failing also to train the managers in how to grant leaves, but we're also failing to train the employees on what leave is and what the different kinds of leave are. At the end of the day, I think it boils down to trust, respect, and liking. If the employee and the employer don't trust each other, then this will perpetually be a problem. It is very likely that if the employee and the company, employees in the company don't trust each other, they don't like each other. And if you don't like the place you work at, then you're likely to play truant more often. You're likely to bunk more often because you just simply don't like your company. You don't like going to work. And in that case, I think that's time for introspection again for both the employee and the company. For the employee, it is that should I continue working this company if I don't like the job? And for the employer, it has to be that, look, if there's so many staff who don't seem to like to come to work, who bunk, who misuse sick leave, then is there something that we need to fix because we are obviously not creating the right motivating environment for work? So again, if you don't like somebody, you're not likely to go out of your way to help that person. If you don't like your job, if you don't like your company, you're not likely to go out of your way to help them. In fact, you'll go out of your way to help yourself at their expense. Now, in the other extreme, where you have companies in high tech, etc., where there is no official sick leave policy, they just say, you're sick, don't come to work, and they pay you. That is based on high trust. That is based on mutual respect. That is based on the assumption that you like your job, you care about the company, and you will only take this privilege of calling in sick. We don't count the days if you're really sick. Again, it is based on trust. So again, at the end of the day, it's a very emotional topic. I think in India, because companies have tended to understaff and have tended to refuse granting leave when it's legitimately should be granted, it has created a reaction where employees take sick leave to be an entitlement and don't see a problem in taking it as casual leave. And this vicious circle has to be broken somewhere. It has to be broken by the companies staffing to the appropriate levels and granting leaves, and not viewing it with suspicion or as a punishment. It has to be broken by employees not using sick leave as casual leave. Now, the last point that I want to make on this topic is, do employers have a right to question somebody if they say that I was sick? What if the person is seen at the mall, or what if the person is seen, dancing in the disco, the previous evening or the next day or whatever? See, I think there are two aspects to this. You can fall sick for one of two reasons. You can fall sick because despite your best efforts, despite your efforts to, look after yourself, to get a good night's rest, etc., you just don't feel good and you don't think you should be going into work. And that's understandable. But if you're irresponsible and you go out partying late night, or you go out drinking and you know that you've got a flight to operate, or you've got a technical job to do, or you've got some important project or presentation to make the next day, and you just have been irresponsible and you call in sick, well, that's not good. I think there's an expectation that employees will behave responsibly and maturely and not do things that will make them too tired to come into work and then say, look, I'm too tired, I shouldn't be coming into work. Yes, you're right, you're too tired, you shouldn't be coming into work, but why are you so tired? And this is something you can do to help that. And companies have every right to check on employees whose sick leave usage and absenteeism patterns exceed the norm. There's a distribution of sick leave usage. There are averages, the statistical models that can be used. And if there's an employee who tends to be absent, tends to call in sick much more than the average, then I think it's time for the company to sit down with the staff and say, hey, what's going on? Is it genuinely a medical problem? Because, we've heard reports that you're taking sick leave and hanging out in the mall and going out partying, etc. Or is it something else? If it's a general medical problem, companies should try to help the staff. But if it is an attitude issue, then I think companies are within the rights to take disciplinary action. Again, this is for those who are outliers in the sick leave distribution. For those who are within the sick leave distribution, who are honest, earnest, sincere employees, I don't think there's any reason for employers to look into the records and see are they really sick or not. All right. So again, it comes down to a matter of trust, matter of how you're perceived, matter of your attitude, a matter of what the company and others happen to know about you, the reputation you carry, and that goes a long way in determining, whether your leaves need to be looked into closely or whether you can be trusted. So, in conclusion, this is my longest episode. It's a very emotional topic. I think companies need to really do their part here to encourage employees to take the leave and make sure they're staffed adequately for that. I think employees need to understand the sick leave is not a form of casual leave, but especially if you're working for a company which is granting you your normal leaves, using sick leave on top of that is actually not the right thing to do. But by all means, and you must, if you're sick, if you're not well, if you don't feel up to coming into work, you should not. You don't help anybody. If you're sick and coming to work, you make others sick as well. But if you're sick because you party every night when you know you have a 7 a.m. shift the next morning, then I think it's time again to introspect and look into what you can do to help yourself be less sick. So that's it. Long episode. Thanks for staying with me. I hope those of you who felt that I was going to take just management side or one side of the equation, satisfied and happy that I did not do that. By nature, I try to always see both sides. My wife tells me that gets me into trouble. because whenever, for example, you have somebody who's in a car accident, you always tend to believe that the person you know is not at fault, it's the other guy at fault. There's always the natural human inclination to trust and believe and look at the point of view of the person who you know. But my natural instinct is to always ask the question, well, who was wrong? And my wife gets really angry. Well, how can you ask who was wrong? This is the wrong question to ask. Obviously so and so was, she's a friend, she couldn't have been wrong. But that's not necessarily the case. You need to be fair, you need to be objective, you need to look at both sides and then come to the conclusion. So thanks for bearing with me. Thanks for participating in the poll. Thanks for all your comments. And feel free to comment on this video with your thoughts. And see you again next episode. Take care.